Okay, now that we set up the basic V-Ray sun and we saw what that lighting looks like, it was okay and cool. If we want to do something perhaps more interesting, we can add an HDRI to light our scene. And an HDRI is a high dynamic range image, which means it has a very wide range of color and light in it, enough so that you can actually generate light directly from the image, and it will cast very accurate lighting, color-wise and intensity-wise, onto your scene. So if you're not familiar with this, let's just take a look at it and you can see more about what I'm talking about. These are specially made images, keep in mind, they're not just a JPEG of a sky. Okay, so what we can do is just turn off our sun. I've already done that here just by clicking enabled off. One other thing we didn't check before that we should, if we go into render setup, go to V-Ray tab, environment, make sure GI environment, the override right here, is not turned on. That will make it so that there's a solid color dome light being emitted onto your scene at all times at an intensity of 1. So it basically overrides your environment. Which means if you had the sky on in here, the default V-Ray sky, and it's set to sunset because the sun is really low, but this is still on, your scene's going to be lit by this, not the sky. So the light won't really work properly. Okay, so keep that in mind. We can actually turn off our default V-Ray sky here too, because actually let's leave that off, because we're going to put in an HDRI which actually covers our background and our environment lighting, so we don't need that on or our background, and the V-Ray HDRI will do all the work. And I'll show you why that's cool. So if you go to create panel, light, V-Ray light, just like a plane light, you can actually drag a plane light out there and create it, but you actually want to change it to a dome light. And it'll look like that, and it actually doesn't matter where it's placed or how big it is or anything like that. The multiplier does matter. But what we're going to do is go to where it says none, and this is a texture that we can apply to it. So under general, we can apply a texture to this light. If we click here and go under V-Ray, this will just bring up our material map browser. And under V-Ray, there's a V-Ray HDRI option, which is what we want. Hit OK. And you'll have to download an HDRI special from somewhere. Most of you probably know what it is, but you usually have to buy them, but there's plenty of free ones. This is one I've purchased in the past, and I'm just going to click on it, and it adds it here. So V-Ray HDRI is now what the texture is for that light. So the light is actually being emitted by an image. What you can do is then drag and drop that into here, and I've already done it. It's right here. And you just make sure and instance it. So now when we adjust this, it's adjusting the image that's applied to that light. Make sure it's on spherical, and you can bring up the preview. It looks like that. It's a nice looking sky. Okay, so that's really all you need to do there for now. Let's go look at these progressive renderings again and see what we've got. Okay, so if we hit progressive render, there you go. That's what is lighting the scene. So actually our background that you're seeing there is that picture that I applied, that V-Ray HDRI, and it is actually putting off light. So like, for example, right here, it's putting off more light than right here because of the color and intensity of that image. And if you could span to the right, scroll to the right, you'd see that there's actually a sun over there, and that's what's putting off light. So you can see shadows being cast here. That's just being cast by that image itself, which is pretty awesome because the lighting and the background match exactly, and it gives you a nice color and a nice mood. Now, because we're in interactive rendering, we can actually open up our materials and go in here and start making adjustments. So one basic adjustment is the horizontal rotation. If we rotate it 180 degrees, you'll see what happens. The sun is now on the left side of us. So the left side of the scene is being lit, and everything over here is in shadow. Now you might want to turn up the intensity a little bit. You can do that, of course. Overall multiplier and render multiplier. You really only need to use one of these. Put that to 2, everything will get much brighter. And you can see the background gets brighter, and so does the lighting on the objects, because they are tied together. They are one and the same, actually. And that is actually pretty nice. I like this. Let's change with some of the rotation again. Let's put it at 90 and see what we get. Now the sun is right out in front of our house, which doesn't look good. That kind of flattens everything out. I don't like that. Keep in mind when you use these HDRIs that generally, let me show you. Generally what it will be doing is the sun, so in this image, there's the sun right there. That sun will generally be right out here to the right of your image if the rotation is 0 degrees. Okay, that's how these HDRIs are made. So if you rotate it 90 degrees, the sun will come to here. If you rotate it 180, the sun will be there. 270, the sun will be back here. Okay, so that's how these work. Keep that in mind. So really, if we wanted the sun to be about there, it'd be probably like a 30-degree rotation, something like that, maybe even less. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, now that's basically back to where our sun was. Okay, and that looks pretty nice. And you'll see the shadows are very soft, and that's because in the image, the sun is not a direct point. It's kind of a big, bright part of the sky. Okay, so keep that in mind too with HDRIs. Some HDRIs will have a lot more contrast. Some will be a lot more soft, like this one we're using. I actually like this soft look. You can do other things like, I mean, there's no reason why you can't turn on a sun as well, and then kind of turn it way down. So if we enabled that, and then turned it way down, that might give us more direct light. See, so that actually looks really nice. So all these shadows and everything, all the environment light is being created by this HDRI, but there's still a sun on that is casting direct light too. Okay, so that's actually getting us really nice results. One thing that I don't like is how sharp the light coming from this is and how soft all the environment light is. So what you can do for that, of course, is turn up the sun in size so that it's now 10. Now it will cast much softer shadows, obviously, because it's much bigger. Okay, so that's a pretty interesting look we have going on. You could go with or without the sunlight, but that's a basic HDRI, and it's giving you really nice colors. Everything looks good, and your background's taken care of already, which is quite nice. Now, if you go into alpha, you'll notice there's still an alpha there, depending on how you set up your light. That HDRI can cause problems with that. Let's look at those settings. Okay, so there's an effect alpha button here. In general, I think we want the alpha to show through so that we can, even though that sky looks really good as a background, you still want maximum control, so you could go back in and add your own sky that looks pretty much like your HDRI and then have full control over it in Photoshop. So having that as a separate thing that you composite in later is probably the best idea, because then you have full control. And we've seen how to composite in skies already. But that's the basics of how those HDRIs work. It's pretty great. This is a great way to get really accurate image-based lighting for your scenes. And it gives you nice, you can download an HDRI that's a really cool sunset. You can download one that's a bright noonday sun. And those will translate into that exact kind of lighting based on the image that you download. So you can get lots of different moods, lots of different effects using HDRIs.